It's Kenya's biggest conversation, and we're now in the throes of budget. We're saying, the time is coming, and that's going to happen. A time like this last year, there were jitters about, and everybody was going crazy in terms of, finance bill. And we picked a couple of things, and we said, no, the taxes, they're punitive. We cannot allow them to continue like this. The finance bill essentially is what gives life to the budget. Once it's passed into law, then you go after that and you find out, all right, appropriations. What are we then going to, how are we then going to be able to spend this money? Where are we going to get it from? So the finance bill is very important because essentially it is the bloodline of the budget. That's what we're going to be talking about this morning. We know what happened last year when the finance bill essentially, which would give life to the budget, was essentially quashed because people said no way. It led to bloody protest. It led to loss of life. It led to so many things. So for us to now start getting into an understanding of what's going to happen, what's going to come in, this will be the first of many conversations that we'll have. And welcoming you to the hot seat of the Situation Room, Alex Kanyi, who's a tax and exchange control partner at Cliffe, Dekker, Hofmeyr, is here with us this morning. Good morning, Alex.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
So we're going to get into some sticky stuff this morning.
Yep.
We're going to get into some sticky... Yeah, I mean, that's a great smile that you have, lighting up the room, essentially.
Yeah.
Some things we will not laugh about in a minute. But before we do, let's get you to some work first. We usually go around the African continent. CT Muga does that. He's not here today.
Yeah.
A couple of days away. And he lands in a country every week where he brings back 5 proverbs for us to go through. So this country that we're in this week is Libya. So I want to give you the proverb and then you will tell us what you think about it and how you would interpret that. Is that all right? Okay. Walk a long way with sandals before you get good shoes.
Well, I think to me it means keep walking, and I don't mean the keep walking that we know.
The other guy. This guy to my left.
But basically means, it doesn't matter. In some other way, whether you crawl, whether you walk, whether you run, just keep moving. So you could be in a situation perhaps where the best you could have to continue walking is just the sandals. Just continue. Just continue. Yeah.
Keep going. You'll get there somehow.
And
then you
somehow.
Get okay.
Yeah, because the alternative would be to wait to have the shoes so that you start moving. But by that time, you've wasted time. Opportunities have been lost. Yeah. So that's what I think about that particular proverb.
Do it now.
Yep.
Keep walking.
It's great. So here we are. A time like this last year, the chatter was about, and everybody was kind of already thinking, okay, first of all, we've seen the numbers. What do they mean? They want to tax us for plastic. What do they mean that we're going to have taxes on 1, 2, 3? We already can't afford life. What do they mean that this is what they actually want to do? It was a bill. We know that a bill, in its introduction, is just a bill. When it is then passed, it then becomes law. And that law then dictates or prescribes what then you're going to be able to do. In this case, what then the budget, which starts, well in August, the year before, will allow us to do later. The finance bill probably was the most famous in Kenya last year. And now we're coming to this new fiscal year, 2025-2026, where we want to know how the country essentially is going to spend whatever money it has, and for the things that it needs to do, where it is going to get the money from. So, Alex, what we would like you to do is tell us what this Finance Bill 2025 says, and which taxes we are going to enjoy paying or not enjoy paying.
Okay. Well, so the bill first is quite broad. So the way it's normally structured is you have some aspects that want to change our Income Tax Act. Then you have others that change the Value Added Tax Act. You have the Excise Duty Act, Tax Procedures Act. Basically, a couple of tax legislation that are being now changed through one bill or one legislation being the Finance Act. Yeah. So there are many things that are within this particular bill this time. Just to highlight a few, and perhaps I'll break them down into sectors. Yeah. So if you're looking at, say, manufacturing, there are a couple of items from a VAT perspective, value-added tax, that were, for example, exempted from tax, but now will be standard rated at 16% for VAT. And you see things like, for example, manufacture of local assembly of vehicles as an example. You also see materials that are used for construction of hospitals as an example, that were previously exempt but now will be subject to VAT. Okay, when you now move to another sector like real estate, a couple of changes there. From an income tax perspective, I don't know what you are doing with affordable housing, because what's going on is that, let's start from a value-added tax perspective. So if I buy materials for purposes of constructing affordable houses, I enjoy a certain VAT incentive. Basically, that gets exempted because I'm helping the government to actually build affordable houses.
Okay.
But there's a proposal within the bill to then remove that exemption for VAT purposes. Then when I move to the income tax perspective, then you have developers who are doing 100+ units every year. And for that, they were getting a 15% corporate tax rate, as opposed to the 30% that would apply to any other company. Again, that is also getting removed. So again, something interesting there that is happening.
Okay, hang on. If you were involved in putting up houses previously, well, say last year,
100+ units, yes.
If you were doing 100+ units,
yes.
Last year you would have a relief of up to 15%. So you would not have to pay tax to 30%. You would only pay 15% of the tax.
Corporate tax.
Corporate tax. Yes.
So now we are saying in this new bill
yes.
that has been removed and you go back to 30%.
Their proposal is to remove it. So when it becomes an act, of course, then it gets removed.
Yes.
But of course, there's a cycle for participation. So again, that is something that is interesting happening there. From a tax administration perspective, also two key things that are happening, which I'd want to highlight. One is normally you have a dispute with the Revenue Authority. You go to the Tax Appeals Tribunal.
Yes.
Then the Tax Appeals Tribunal, for example, decides not in your favor. Then you decide to move to the High Court.
Yes.
So what is the change that they want to do now? They want to introduce a change to say, as you move to the High Court, the Revenue Authority can actually issue agency notices to your banks. To your bank, to start collecting the money, even as you go to appeal to the High Court. And that's quite serious,
Serious.
Okay.
That's quite serious. So that's also happening. I think I just want to mention one, then you can come up with your question.
No, I'm just one.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us the next one. Then I want to put this on. I want to establish this on a foundation in terms of now what you do for us to now be able to understand that. But please go on to the next one.
The next one is around data protection and trade secrets. So they also want to do some amendment to the Tax Procedures Act. So currently, there is a law that requires businesses to actually integrate their systems with KRA systems. So basically, KRA will have real-time view of what is happening with your business, and therefore be able to check, this is what your business is producing, vis-a-vis this is how much taxes you're paying. But there was a limit to say, you can, of course, access my system, but not to access my trade secrets or personal data. But now the proposal is to remove those two limitations, basically to give the Revenue Authority access to anything.
Full access?
Yeah, access to anything. So now I think you could ask your question now.
Yes. Okay.
Wow.
So now, usually, I mean, if Ndu stood on the side of the road and said, this is punitive tax, somebody would ask me, okay, so what do you know? You went to School of Journalism and International Relations, so you have no idea. You, however, Alex, work with Cliffe, Dekker and Hofmeyr. What do you do then that, because I want to then be able to establish that, what you're telling us then operates within, these circles where we would now be able to get a greater understanding of it, right?
Yes.
So tell us what you do then, because now that establishes why you have an understanding of all of this.
So I'm a tax lawyer at Cliffe, Dekker, Hofmeyr. We can call it CDH. I've been practicing tax for more than 12 years. And I started getting my experience from KPMG, where I did about 9 years, and now almost 3 years now at CDH. So I've been doing tax for all my life.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm certified public accountant, so I know math. Of course, I'm a lawyer.
At the very least.
At the very least. And also a certified public secretary. So I advise clients, local, multinational, on anything tax, be it tax dispute resolution, be it tax structuring, be it tax planning, or to simple things of tax compliance.
All right. So that establishes it for us, okay?
Can you help the government with the tax regime?
Yes, we do. We do actually help the government in many ways. So, for example, when we are talking today about the Finance Bill 2025, I've been listing from Finance Bill 2020. So every year, I analyze what is the proposed change, what is the impact, and actually produce documents that give guidance on whatever should be done to change things. And I don't just end at writing. I've appeared several times before the National Committee, Departmental Committee on Finance and Planning. Now being headed by Honorable Kuria.
Okay.
Where we give comments and say, fine, this is what you propose to do. We think this will work, and we think this won't work. We propose perhaps you change it this way so that to make it better. So I've been in that space for quite some time.
Okay.
That's what the regime I want to.
Yeah. For the purpose of establishment, because we talk about things, and so obviously when we're looking at the finance bill and we're looking at ways in which essentially they're going to fund the budget, the budget essentially is what's going to run the country, how you're going to spend your money. Now, it is the participation that you talked about, then it goes into a round of public participation where people are saying, do we agree or do we not agree? Usually by the time they've done the thing, most people, unfortunately, whether it is in our mind or reality, the public participation is kind of like, okay, so you participated, fantastic, we're moving along with the thing, right? Now, I want to look at these two issues that you talked about, which bear great importance on how people are then going to be able to operate in business. Whereas Kenya Revenue Authority has the mandate to collect taxes. That's what they're supposed to do, collect money. That's it. Does this encroach on how businesses will operate if they're saying now full visibility of your business and what you're able to do, and they can go ahead and get the money from you while you go to the tribunal? What would happen in a normal case whereby I go to the tribunal and the tribunal says, okay, this is something that could be heard? The imaginable thing would be that, okay, everything is on hold while this case is heard. But if we are saying that now KRA can put an agency notice on your finances to start to take what they want before the case is heard, it sounds to me like it's unlawful. But I don't know. From a tax point of view, what does that sound like?
Yeah, so the agency notices will be issued if you lose at the tax appeals tribunal. So at the tax appeals tribunal, when the case is continuing, they won't go after your money in the bank. Okay. But if you lose at the tax appeals tribunal, you actually have a right to appeal to the High Court and appeal, Court of Appeal upwards, right? However, even as you appeal from the tax appeals tribunal, the proposed change is that they will issue those agency notices and try to collect the money. And to my knowledge, this is actually unconstitutional. First, it restricts your right to justice. Two, it condemns you unheard because you still have a case. You haven't exhausted all remedies at appeal. Yeah. So,
but why would you go to and follow me here? Why would you go to that remedy, not knowing what the outcome would be, unless you do know the outcome? Because it sounds to me like you don't know what the outcome of the tribunal will be, but you're already putting it into a proposed law that says if you lose at the tribunal, we're going to be able to take it. How do you know I'm going to lose? What if I win? Why would you put it into the law when you're not sure of the outcome?
No, interesting, but I guess it's just a way to enhance revenue collection if I was sitting on the other side. Yeah, to make sure that we collect the money, and if you win, for example, at the High Court, then we just refund you.
Government does not refund
you, so that's where the problem is. If government, for example, had the money to actually refund you, and it was doing it timely, then perhaps you could entertain the thought of
refund.
Government and refund is like those supermarkets where you go and they don't have change and they give you a pencil that doesn't even write, or a piece of gum that you can't chew,
or sweet,
or a sweet that tastes like kerosene. That's what sounds like a refund from government for me.
Yeah, it's not the easiest of processes, and in fact, there is a recent decision by the tribunal where a taxpayer had gone there and said, "Fine, KRA, you've established that I actually." Due for a refund. I want the tribunal to force the government to actually refund me. And what the tribunal then said was the way the current law is worded, it just says KRA has to make a decision on the refund or not. As to whether you get the cash, that's a different process. And you can imagine the kind of pains that perhaps a taxpayer would have if they have to then wait for extended periods for monies to be refunded to them, especially with this particular change. Yeah.
The other one you mentioned, sorry, Charles, the other one you mentioned is on this real estate.
Yes.
Now, in the Kenya Kwanzaa government, there's a word for it. There was a manifesto. No, it was the plan. That's what it was.
The plan.
250,000 units were to be constructed every year. I don't know where we were for 2000. Let's give them some wiggle room. So maybe not much happened in 2022, but 2023 marked the first full year, and then that's perhaps when we should have seen 250,000 units. I don't know that happened. 2024, okay, I don't know where we are in 2025, but that was a number for units per year. Now, this was taking into consideration everything, whether it was private sector who came in to join, it was consolidated, that number. Now, one of the tax measures that you talk about is this corporate tax of 30%, having been reduced to 15% for those who were constructing 100 and more units. One would see that it was an incentive to kind of help government along to do what they wanted to do. Now, to reintroduce this additional 15% in this finance bill, what would be the rationale behind that? We understand that, they're looking to trying to mop up as much as possible, but would it not appear counterproductive to this 250,000 units that the government is seeking to achieve?
Yeah, to me it looks counterproductive. And by the way, affordable housing is something that I'm really passionate about, and anything around housing and helping people to actually acquire their own houses. But we have to take a step back and look at it we have our national tax policy, and then we have Kenya's medium-term revenue strategy. In these two documents, one consistent theme that you will find is that government actually intends and plans to reduce tax expenditure. What do I mean by tax expenditure? Look at tax incentives, check whether they're effective or not, and perhaps cut some of them to ensure that government collects maximum revenue. Now, let's come back to affordable housing. This particular change was introduced actually in 2017. This incentive was introduced in 2017. What we haven't seen is a report to say, based on this incentive that was provided, this is the match that we can see, in terms of houses being built or the incentive actually working. So we haven't seen that, and it would have been useful to see that. But it appears to me that then it is one of those incentives that perhaps government thinks is not working, and therefore they want to cut it back.
Okay.
Yeah. But is it consistent with the government's agenda for affordable housing? Definitely not. It's not even consistent with the government's agenda to actually encourage people to build as many houses as they want. So I think there's some misalignment there, which the government needs to look at.
You said, Bwana Kanyi, that you've sat in the national government in these committees, and you probably talk to them and advise them on how to tax Kenyans. And if you look at the document, the Incoming Tax Act,
yes,
it seems that there are many areas of where the burden of tax will be increased on Kenyans. As you're telling us, the corporate tax, the full visibility of KRA onto our private companies' data, and to know whether you're paying the correct number of tax. But the question is, there's an economist who says the Laffer curve, that the way you tax people less is you tax people according to revenue collected. And if you do not tax highly, then you have a chance of growing the economy. But if you continue taxing people heavily the way they are doing, then the chances of even growing this revenue will be lower. And you know what KRA collects. Do you think that the government could sit down and engage you guys in a way so that you can tell them that we need to reduce some of these tax areas?
I think I would say they're perhaps between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. I think I was listening to the show when I was coming, and we were talking about a 4.2 trillion budget, with 800 and plus billion deficit.
Yes.
Basically, we don't know where the money will come from. And you have to look at your sources of revenue. It's either you tax or you borrow. So I've, for the longest, been arguing that perhaps the focus should not be on revenue collection. It should be, when you're setting budget, why don't we just live within our means? If I'm just able to pay, I'm thinking that's the difficult conversation that we actually need to have.
This is interesting because I think that we are, and again, I don't know, but it just makes sense to me as I look at it, and maybe you can correct me from a layman's point of view, that we are focusing on the wrong thing. Yeah. That we say the country needs more money, so you're saying, where is this money, where I can get it?
You get it.
As opposed to, because the business of government is to create a conducive environment in which these things can thrive. So for me, the focus is on the wrong thing. And please direct me if I'm also focusing on the wrong thing. We are focusing on where to get the money, as opposed to creating an environment whereby the people in the nation can actually build the economy, and you don't have to look for where these extra taxes will come from. If you don't widen the tax base, if you don't lower the taxes, if you don't create an environment where people can actually enter into business and not have these throttling requirements in order to have it done, or these time wasting, or these huge tax engagements or necessity, that's where you have the problem. You cannot get more if you're not having people activated more in business, for example. Are we not looking at the wrong thing to get this money? KRA has not hit their target. They're 800 billion off the 400 billion off the mark in May. And we've got a month to go. Are they going to make 600 and something billion in the next 1 month?
Possible.
That one, they will surprise you. They normally do.
Where does it come from?
Towards the end of the month. So that one, they will surprise you. But to direct your mind, of course, yes. Where our focus should be how do we encourage people to actually do business, generate revenue, and from that revenue then pay tax. I think you're right. And tied to it is, how do we even plan to spend our money? We've heard of zero-based budgeting, accrual accounting, etc., all that. But we still end up with a 4.2 trillion budget. And you wonder, do we actually need all this, for the budget? Because then that is what pushes us in terms of looking for revenue. And at the end of the day, if we will have deficits, then the next year we'll have the same cycle repeating itself. Yeah. And perhaps you hear, for example, we are looking at up to 2027, perhaps doing a budget of up to 6 trillion. So in terms of where we are going,
6 trillion.
in terms of where we are going, it's already known. In terms of how much we should be spending, revenue collection, of course. Okay, just recently, that's when they are becoming a little bit realistic. But if you look at those two documents I was talking about, of course, we are looking at collecting huge sums of money from taxes. So I guess our projection is wrong, definitely, but there's something we can do in terms of just creating the environment for people to pay tax. And connected to it is also address taxpayer apathy.
There must be some good things about this, isn't it?
Yep, definitely. And I think we've been bashed many times when we just speak about the negative sides of the bill without highlighting the positive sides of the bill. So just maybe like 4 points. One is per diem, that is given tax-free for employees. The proposal is to increase it from 2,000 per day to 10,000 per day.
For all of us?
Government.
If your employer gives you per diem.
Government.
But we'll probably
benefit. This was a good thing.
A little, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for those who benefit from per diems. It is a good thing.
From 2,000 to 10,000.
To 10,000, which is okay. Then we have some aspect of what we call advance pricing agreements, and I just want to explain that a little bit. So you see multinationals, when they perhaps have companies, say, in the UK and Kenya, and these two entities, of course, are related and they are trading or getting services from each other. The requirement is at arm's length to make sure that whatever price I get from my related company in the UK is perhaps relatable to or comparable to a price I'll get from a third party, to just make sure I don't use that mechanism to then abuse the tax regime or just get incentives that I'm not supposed to get. So with advanced pricing agreements, you basically have an agreement with the Kenya Revenue Authority to say, this is how I've structured my company and related party transactions. This is the pricing that, I've done a benchmarking study, and this is the pricing that I will have. And therefore, I want us to agree with KRA that I am okay to use this price for, like 5 years. So that then you don't have a transfer pricing audit from the Kenya Revenue Authority in between coming to say, we don't like how your business is structured and therefore we want to collect more tax from you. So basically binds the KRA to a particular agreement in terms of how you're pricing your goods or services and gives you some form of predictability and certainty. So the third one I wanted to highlight is, Nairobi wants to also encourage people to invest. Nairobi International Financial Center, NIFC, wants to also encourage people to invest into the country. And there are a couple of incentives that they are also being proposed within the bill. One of it is for startups, they will enjoy a reduced corporation tax rate of 15%.
Okay.
Okay. For the first 3 years, and then 20% for 4 years after the 15, the 3 years have lapsed.
What is it currently for us to see?
No, for startups, there's nothing, basically.
What would be, if you started business in Kenya?
It will be 30%.
It would be 30%.
Yeah, so they're reducing that to 15%. Okay, so that's also something positive. And for large investments of 3 billion plus, you get 15% corporate tax rate for 10 years. And then it goes to 20% for the next 10 years, which again is something positive that we are seeing within the bill, which is good. And then the last one which I wanted to highlight is on tax procedures. Basically, there was a gap where KRA could, for example, you could go to KRA, tell them, I don't agree with your assessment, basically object. And therefore, KRA then gives you an amended assessment and tell you, we have had you, here's the amended assessment, just pay. But now the bill says when the Revenue Authority is giving you an amended assessment, they need to also give you reasons as to why they are amending the assessment, basically to give you some form of, justice, to make sure you can question the reasoning behind the amended assessment by the commissioner, you can actually challenge it and things like those. So those are just a few of the positive things that I can be able to see from the
Looking
bill.
at those positive things, they are not Mwananchi centric. They are company centric. The biggest question Kenyans would have is how well would this Finance Act 2025 be beneficial to them and also allow them to have a little bit of coins in their pockets, because they don't get notes anymore.
That's an interesting question. I don't think with this bill we have addressed the issue of disposable income or money that gets left in your pocket. I don't think we have dealt with that here.
Yeah.
The last time we actually made an attempt at this was, I think, in the COVID time, 2020, 2021. We had what we call the Tax Laws Amendment Act of that time. And what did they do? They reduced the highest band for pay-as-you-earn from 30% to 25%. That's direct money to your pocket, okay? Because you get tax less. Then they also did a VAT reduction from the standard rate of 16% to 14%. Again, that's straight money into your pocket. They did the same for companies in terms of the corporate income tax rate, reducing it from the headline of 30% to 25% again. Yeah? So back then, you could actually say there's an attempt to make sure there's money in people's pockets. And to your question of the Laffer curve, at that particular time, the Revenue Authority, in terms of their reports, they actually said they recorded some significant increase in tax collection during that time. Do they want to test it now? I'm not sure. And in fact, it's a question that I've had the opportunity to ask some of the guys in high level in government. And what they're telling us is where the government currently is, we don't want to try that now. It is in the plan. For example, we will see it in our medium-term revenue strategy. We want to reduce the PAYE rate. We want to check if we can reduce the VAT rate. But they're not doing it in this particular bill. So ordinary mwananchi, I think in Kiswahili will need to vumilia kidogo.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, what happens this year bears a lot on, or rather takes on a lot of the dregs of what happened last year. And that one would imagine that you take into consideration the atmosphere of the nation, you take in economic issues, you take in the social justice arena, you take in all of that. One would imagine that you do beyond the number crunching. Are we seeing that in the bill, which is still at the place where you can wiggle room a little bit and discuss issues, is it taking into consideration things that happened last year? And are we seeing less punitive measures across board than we saw the year before?
Okay. What they're doing with this particular bill, of course, they're also not increasing the rates for taxes. So we are not seeing an increase in the VAT rate or any change in the pay-as-you-earn structure and the bands. So we've not seen any change around that. So, but at the same time, they want to collect about 175 billion from the measures that they will introduce through this finance bill 2025. So in terms of reading the mood and how perhaps the public might look at it, perhaps they may look at it more favorably because there's no real direct impact, say for a few items which you could go through. So I'm expecting perhaps it will have an easier time compared to Finance Bill 2024. Yeah.
Okay. So as of April this year, KRA had collected 2 trillion shillings on the nose. That's the amount that they had collected when they look at the year, right? Which leaves about, they were supposed to, I believe it was 2.4 trillion that they were supposed to collect for this year. That leaves about 400 billion shillings. And you said that, don't be surprised that in a month they could collect this 400 billion because essentially we're looking at the year closing in June, right? Where would this money come from? to close the year with 400 billion. Gafla bin vu.
It's abracadabra.
I don't want to speculate, but you see, for me, I've been tracking this for quite some time, and over the years, I've been able to track.
Yeah.
So it'll be perhaps Q1 saying, government, you're off target. Q2, government, you're off target. Q3, government, you're still off target. Because you're still continuing to track, then you're surprised. Q4, Allah.
2 trillion shillings in April.
You met budget. Oh, nice. Then you go to the next year, that cycle somehow repeats itself. So you find quarters when the government is not meeting targets, but come end of year,
Okay.
it will be. How?
Alex,
don't ask me. I don't know.
It looks very suspicious and fishy.
How? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Because these things are based on scientific way. You can see where your revenues are coming from. How do you get them? Do people pay tax only on this last day? Or do they go and force people, you pay up?
It's an interesting question. I think only KRA could tell us how they do it.
It's the stuff of sorcery. Okay, so now when we look at this bill, just walk us through the process just a little bit so for us to understand. This bill has all the proposals in it, and this was part of the budget making process. All of these things that we see is part of the process that then started in August 2024 for it to be presented at this time. Now, if it is accepted after the process of public participation, whatever that may be, what happens next, and how do we see that now into the completion of this particular budget cycle?
Okay. Let's start with the notice that has just been put out for the public to actually submit memoranda to the departmental committee on finance and national planning. So there's an advert out requiring the public to give their comments by the 27th of May. So basically for the input to be considered. Once the input has been considered, that departmental committee, they will then give a report to the whole house of the National Assembly. Then that gets debated. A couple of changes might be introduced here and there. And then, of course, it's passed by Parliament and then assented to by the President. That has to happen by the 1st of July. Why? Because from the 1st of July, which is now the start of the government financial cycle, there are particular provisions within the bill which then take effect immediately from 1st of July. Okay? Then there are just 2 which take effect from January 2026.
Or next year?
Next year,
okay.
January 2026. Okay. So basically that's what we expect to happen. And with it, of course, we expect also the Revenue Authority to enforce whatever has been already passed into law to aid them then to collect the monies they are hoping to collect to support budget.
Okay. What makes sense, Alex? Because we can look at the nitty-gritty, and I'm sure as we continue with this series that we talk about what's in the finance bill and what exactly it would then mean. I believe one of them, and I don't know if you've come across it, is are we seeing the reintroduction of the Eco Levy, whereby we see that plastic packaging and all of this will have an additional tax on it? Is that in this bill right now?
Yes. So there are 2 things. So there's what NEMA is trying to do with the extended producer responsibility and the levies that go with that. So of course that will impact anyone also doing packaging. And then on this other side, you have a lot of, we call it export and export and investment promotion levy. So on some of the plastics that we import into the country, and basically an increase in terms of the excise duty and the levy that would apply on those particular products. So of course that has a direct impact in terms of manufacturing. And if I'm packaging my materials using some of these things, definitely I have to consider that into the price that then goes to the consumer.
But this is for imported products.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when I was growing up, and even until now, there would be a budget. You say, look, guys, this is the budget. But this budget is not based on what you're expecting, right?
Yes.
You do this budget based on what you have, what you know you have. We have...
Not what you're aspiring to.
Is it foreign? Does it sound bad? Okay.
No, it sounds okay.
So, if I have 20,000 shillings, Alex, follow me. I am going to budget for 20,000 shillings, right? We will go to school. I don't know how they used to do it, but somehow we will go to school. We will buy food. Maybe you'll get a pair of shoes. You will do whatever. When the money is finished, the activities also have finished. Yeah. It may sound simplistic, but that is what my understanding is of what you do when you apply budget. Whether you apply it for an individual, whether you apply it for a nuclear unit like a family, or whether you apply it for government. That there are countries on this planet that budget according to what they have.
What you can raise.
Is it possible to budget with what you have and what you can realistically raise? Is it possible?
It is possible.
Okay.
Because for government, they already know. They already have an idea. They're already projecting how much they're going to collect. They know, for example, they want from, in the year 2025, 2026, in terms of tax revenue, they get to about 2.5 trillion. Then top it up with other appropriation in aid agencies that collect money on behalf of the government, blah, blah, blah. Kind of gets you to about 3 or 3 point something trillion. But again, even with that in mind, they still budget for 4.2 trillion in terms of expenditure.
Why?
I struggle to understand why. It could be ambition.
You want to ambition yourself to 1 trillion shillings?
Is it broad-based or
it's
bread-based?
We're talking about 1 trillion shillings. It's a lot of money. 3.6 trillion shillings is what you've done everything. You said, okay, we need to buy new curtains for the country. We need to do whatever. We've done everything. 3.6. You've done everything. 3.6. But then you budget for 4. I could be, it sounds funny, but I really want to understand that if you budget for this amount of money because you know that is what you need and that's what you have, why would you need more?
You're very correct in what you're saying, because in that budget, I see the repairs of the State House.
You see, I was right, the curtains.
You see repairs of the government facilities, which we do not require. So when you look at that budget, on the repairs alone, and you're budgeting probably, State House was, I think, 2 billion or 3 billion in it. Deputy President's house, 2 billion. Every year, we repair those things, every year.
Can you imagine what kind of houses are they?
And we repair in billions.
And we repair in billions, yes.
In every year. And it's in the budget, which you do not have. And that's why Ndu is asking, why can't you just budget with what you have?
I don't understand. Unless it's a thing that some governments have to say, well, no, we need to budget for extra because you never know what's going to happen down the line. But that still is in the budget. Emergency is in the budget. Isn't it?
Yes.
So for people to really understand, because this is where the problem is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because these monies that go into this extra is where we have civil society organizations using the fancy term called budgeted corruption, whereby you put it in at the very beginning so that everybody can and everybody will come and ask you what happened, and you say, well, excuse me, it was there from the beginning. How do we get away from this kind of a practice? And we put it out into the open so that we can know what exactly happens or doesn't happen.
And that's the difficult conversation that we need to have. To just say, I think like I was mentioning, you have this budget, you know definitely that you won't have funds to finance the budget in the first place. So let's deal with that as number one. Number two, you have things within the budget that perhaps to an ordinary Kenyan, we do not understand why such items should be in the budget in the first place. Yeah? And how do we do it then? I'm guessing, I think we need to push our members of parliament for that. They have been seeing the supplementary budgets that they've been doing, kind of reducing the estimates and how much they intend to spend gradually. But I guess even before this particular finance bill is passed, could we have something around, this is the much you're able to collect, and this is how much you're able to get from all our sources. Just cut the budget by the deficit already of 800 and something billion. Let's talk about a 3.5 trillion budget as opposed to a 4.2 trillion budget.
Okay.
I think it's common sense. To be fair.
To be fair.
Common is not common after all.
So, where does this after this process and the president assents to all of this, and then we see some of those, because usually what is in the finance bill is a lot of it is proposed taxes, right? Additionals here and there, and so it comes into effect usually by the 1st of July. Where does the appropriations bill fall in this entire process?
Okay. Normally, after the Finance Act has been passed, then we start discussing appropriation,
which is
basically kind of we've quote unquote secured the money or where it's going to come from, and therefore have the confidence to say now we want to spend XYZ here. So that's the sequence.
Okay, that's the appropriate. Yeah. Is it true?
True what?
Is it true? Because you've said, and even though you did it in inverted commas, you said that since now we have secured how we are going to spend, we then go ahead to say this is who and where it will be spent, but you still don't have the money.
You don't have the money. You're basically projecting to collect it or raise it during the year. But again, I think I'd perhaps support them to some extent.
Okay.
You actually need to plan.
I agree.
So you can't wait to collect the money. It's in the bank and now then start planning
you need to have a plan, that's for sure.
For spending. So you first get realistic around how much you're going to collect, and then based on that, plan the appropriation, which gets us just back to the reality of how much.
Can you do proper, efficient, and even authentic planning on the backdrop of the kind of debt that Kenya has? I mean, we've looked at these numbers over and over again. For you to look at 100 shillings and about 70 or so of that goes towards debt. That's the first charge on the consolidated account. It's the first one that is paid, and it is more than 50% of revenue goes out into the payment of debt. That is still a present situation when you have a new budget. What does the debt burden play in the budget, or does it not take it into account at all when a new budget is being done?
Quite a difficult conversation. And it's basically where we are in terms of how the country is being run. So you have to promise, or you've already promised certain things in terms of implementation. You're perhaps attending rallies and saying, that road from here to there, and then from there to there, and then there to there, we will actually build it, and you've promised, And then you come to the collection side, and you perhaps don't have the money from your own sources. What do? Then you get yourself in that cycle of borrowing again, even though you're already carrying a lot of debt, borrowing again to ensure that certain projects are done. Like you say, if 70% is already going to pay debt, how much is left for development? And where will the money for that development come from?
And those are the questions. And we have to continue putting it out there, if anything, so that the people who are making these decisions know that the people on the other end actually know. We know that you know. And that's what we want to do as we continue to look into these issues around finance in terms of how the country essentially will spend its money and what it means for the people. So we want to say thank you very much, Alex, for being here this morning. Alex Kanyi is a tax and exchange control partner at Cliffe, Dekker and Hofmeyr, and has been here with us this morning as we're looking into unpacking the proposed amendments in Finance Bill 2025. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the next.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.